Welcome to Rising Waters, the podcast that explores how communities and industries are adapting to the increasing threat of floods.
In today's episode, we're focusing on farming and rural life in the face of flooding.
We'll be talking with two guests who have deep roots in agriculture to understand the unique challenges farmers face when floods hit, from crop losses to soil degradation, and how they prepare for and recover from these events.
We'll also explore the support systems available, the role of technology, and the barriers that still exist in accessing much needed assistance.
Whether you're a farmer, a rural resident, or just interested in how rural communities build resilience, this episode will provide insights into the realities of farming and living rurally in flood-prone areas.
Let's introduce our guests.
Right, so we're here with our two guests today. I'm just going to get you to quickly introduce yourself, so I'll start with you, Alex.
Hi, my name's Alex. I'm part of the EA's agriculture team in the North East area, but I was also brought up and still live on my family's farm just south of Durham City. We are the fourth generation that have farmed there, former coal board farm, so still quite integrated in the rural community as well as working for the EA.
Nice. And Billy?
Hi, so yeah, I'm Billy. I farm near Darlington, just between Darlington and Barnard Castle. On the Raby Estate, we have a couple of farms on the Raby Estate, and we have crops and we have cattle and we have free range laying hens as well. Family farm, so farm in partnership with my dad, and I also do a bit of work with the NFU. So I'm council delegate for the NFU, National Farmers Union, and I'm Northern Regional Board Chairman as well.
Very nice. You've got a lot on your plate then.
Well, it keeps us busy, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you kind of started to touch on it already, but can you tell a little bit more about your background and your connection to rural farming as well?
So yes, so I'm farming, day-to-day farming on the farm.
Yeah.
Doing that day to day with the challenges that throws at you. It's 7 days a week job, working with livestock, working with crops, working with nature. The weather's a factor of that. We can't control the weather. We can't control a lot around nature. So we're doing that and we're trying to make the most of it and what we're doing. Yeah, and proud of what we're doing.
Absolutely.
In terms of food production. Food production is the core of what we're doing. Quite proud of what we do produce, and also some environmental work as well. You know, there's bits and pieces on the farm around that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Bit about your background?
Probably much of the same, really. That currently at home we're in a period of transition, so we're currently contract farming at home, 80 acres of permanent pasture. But a lot of what I see is the farmers that I work with day to day in terms of working for the EA. So although we do routine farm inspections as part of the bread and butter of what we do, we're also there to offer a service of help and support wherever we can. And that's really the area where we see how much farmers do often struggle and find things difficult, or also really get an idea of what people are concerned about any given time, because you turn up to these visits and you do literally walk into people's lives and their hopes and their dreams and their livelihoods and their families, and all of that is so ingrained in what people do as farmers, usually especially on family farms, that a lot of what we do is just trying to look at how we can give some advice, guidance and support, and also highlight issues further up the chain if we can.
Yeah,
Amazing.
absolutely.
Definitely. So I guess a bit of what we're going to explore today is flooding and how that affects yourselves, people you work with and things like that. So the first question I've got for you both today is pretty much how flooding affects your agriculture and things like that, the challenges that come with it. So yeah, if you can, I don't know if you've got experience from the NFU, Billy, or work, Alex.
Although we're quite fortunate at home in terms of that we haven't been massively impacted by flooding ourselves, you see so much of this in respect of what we see at work and who we speak to in areas across the North East. And I mean, we cover an area from Berwick all the way down until nearly Staithes into North Yorkshire. So we see a real vast array of farming systems, and
it's a huge patch to cover.
Exactly, and people with different sort of farming enterprises within that. And flooding is something that's been incredibly widespread, and you see people concerned because they've had the environmental issues quite aside to start with, but in terms of livestock loss and crop loss and nutrient loss and just reduced yields of what they actually are able to produce, it's such an enormous impact on a business, which when it entirely boils down to it, you're completely reliant on the weather.
Absolutely.
And in a bad season, you know, your arable crops are are gone, and the value is so far decreased from what it could be if you have a positive year.
Yeah.
So that's not to mention, obviously, we're really trying to promote soil health and sort of better soil structures and better soil management at the moment. And it's something we regularly see, that by impact of flooding, a lot of the nutrients, or even pesticides or fertilizers that are used, are completely washed off. So there's such an environmental impact there, not least because that's financial loss, but also such an environmental sort of impact as well, that it's just a devastating effect all over. And this is only possibly a third, if that, of the issues that we see.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's tough. It happens to you. It happens around you if you experience it. Thankfully, where I'm farming, I'm on the side of a hill, so the water tends to run past us. We have fields that flood, and you lose crop on them.
Yeah.
So you put our corn, our wheat, barley, oilseed rape in the ground, and regularly, we lose areas in a wet year. So last year, end of 23, we lost some large areas, quite a few acres of land.
Right.
But I would consider myself fortunate to others. Other people a bit further downstream, lower lying areas, they're getting the water running to them as well, and it's causing big issues and huge areas of crop loss. And you do your best to establish the crops, and then they get lost. So if a crop's underwater for a period of several days, depending how old it is, it's gone. It's wiped out and lost.
Okay.
And then you're looking for an opportunity to try and re-drill with all the cost that is. So it's changing how people are having to farm.
Yeah.
People aren't growing high-value crops, potatoes and things like that, which cost an awful lot of money to grow. People are having to change where they grow them and how they grow them. And it's having a big impact, and people are having to change what they do a little bit around that.
And I guess it's becoming more common now as well, and more people are being flooded. Is that something that you're seeing now?
I would certainly see that in terms of the farms that I visit. And it's such a widespread issue as well. You can't say it's in the very north of the patch that we cover, or the very south. It's really actually quite widespread
Everywhere.
And there's certain watercourses where we'll kind of visit a farm there and go, we're going to see issues here, or people that have had an impact of flooding, because we know that area is quite volatile and quite vulnerable to it. So incidentally, we do quite a lot of engagement work as well with farmers. So we'll occasionally go to auction marts and have stands there. And you can see the frustration if you've had heavy rainfall just before you go, quite understandably, that people do want solutions and want answers. And it's such a mental health impact.
Absolutely,
for farmers, quite aside from anything else, the stress of things that are actually often so beyond your control.
And I think one of the key things is because it's not a job where you go home.
No.
7 days a week, and you live on site as well. So if you've got a flooded field or your farm is flooded, you can't switch off. So on a weekend,
That
you're
is
still
your
looking
home.
at it, you're still dealing with it.
Absolutely.
If your crops have been wiped out, once you've actually dealt with the flooding as such, as long as buildings, houses, everything else isn't physically flooded, you've still got to live with the fact and the sort of mark of it. So I think it does have a big toll on people, doesn't it? It hangs over, and it can take a long time before flooding clears and before you're able to re-drill crops, etc. So I think it does have an impact on people.
And people have such a pride in what they do as well. To see that completely washed away by circumstances so often beyond their control is really heartbreaking.
And stock's another factor, where there's flooding around stock, most of the time people can move stock. You can see it. If there's a rain event coming, a field that's vulnerable to it, you can move the stock out before it even happens. But when you're working around stock as well, and it's outside your control, so you might have livestock out on a grass field, and it's partly submerged, and you're running out of grass, and there's challenges around that which people can normally handle. It's just another stress factor.
You see it in such stark reality, I think, when people are lambing and they're wanting to get lambs sort of turned out to grass and not in the shed. And shed space is so often quite a finite resource when you've got a lot of lambs to hopefully turn out. And then obviously they're quite vulnerable if you put them out into circumstance, so you don't have land that isn't vulnerable, that can have quite devastating effects on another area of your business as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And have you been on farms where it has been kind of that worst case scenario, there haven't been anywhere to move the livestock, and there has been any losses perhaps because of that?
I would say I've seen more losses probably on crop side than livestock often, because a lot of the places where we have gone where there's big flooding impacts, they have had areas that they've reasonably been able to move their livestock to, which has been incredibly fortunate. And I mean, unfortunately, not everybody is in that position, but certainly in terms of having fences washed away that they've worked hard to reinstate, or crops that they've wanted to grow. I mean, what Billy's touching about people not wanting to grow expensive crops is really true now, that people just don't dare.
Yeah.
And these are sort of fertile. It's often near rivers, which is a fertile land. Is often low lying. It's near rivers traditionally, and it's very fertile land, and people are having to change the farming practices and cropping to manage that.
And I guess on that, so you're talking about people having to change what crops they plant and things like that to prepare for flooding. What other measures have you seen people put in place? So I don't know if you've put things in yourselves, like drainage systems in your own farms, or like when you've gone on site visits. What other things are people doing to prepare for these sort of events?
So we've been personally, I know other people as well, we try to maintain, we spent a lot of money over generations. Money's been spent on the farm before we had it as well, putting drainage systems into sort of clear water and in a sensible way. So maintaining that where we can is a big thing which most farmers will undertake. And then after that, it's some of it's about soil. So we're moving less soil now. We've moved from a plough-based system to sort of moving less soil and in direct drilling where we can, and that can help with water. The soil can handle the extremes of moisture then more.
Right.
So it holds onto the water a little bit more in the dry spells in the summer, and then when it's wet, it can handle it a bit more and maybe acts as a sponge and lets it drain slower. So people are using new techniques for various reasons, but that is one of the upsides of that sort of system, isn't it?
And people are so much keener now to try and avoid any compaction in the soil as well. So obviously if they can keep the soil more free draining, it's going to mitigate a bit of that risk, or at least make the land a bit more resilient to it.
Yeah.
So you do see a lot of that as well.
Because what's good, it's good business as well. Because you touched on earlier, losing nutrients from your soil. No one wants to do that.
Right.
We want to maintain them and actually runoff as well. Extreme situations, you can have the high quality soil running off the ground and causing issues elsewhere, which isn't in the farmer's interest. It's in no one's interest, to see that.
Yeah. In terms of other kind of support, what's the farming community like in terms of supporting each other? Do you see a lot of that, or is it kind of more kept, everyone's trying to more look after themselves?
I think we're getting, as an industry, so much better at talking to each other. I would suggest, I don't know whether you would agree, Billy, I think there is probably still a stoicism there with some things, but I do think people are encouraged to pick up the phone a bit more, or say, I know that you've had an issue here, but a lot of the time people, when they're out and about, will observe what's happening to the neighbours, so there isn't probably an element of camaraderie with it as well, but it's...
I think on the physical side, you always help your neighbour. Yeah. If you see something going wrong, if there's something going stock, the worst case scenarios happening, if there was some flooding, for example, or even a fence broken down, the stock's out, you help each other out on a physical basis. We're very good at doing that. Yeah. So we rally around and we, as a community, work like that. But I think it's a very important point you're talking on, the pressures, and we're all under more pressure nowadays. And I think it's about supporting each other morally as well, isn't it? And sort of mentally as well, just to recognise when someone's struggling in that respect as well, and to sort of rally around them and do that. And I think there's more of that, isn't there? I think we are improving as an industry slowly.
People are talking more.
Yes,
I think.
It's slowly improving, I think, isn't it?
I think that's probably quite a societal change, but it's really positive that we're seeing that as an industry.
Yeah. Brilliant. No, that's great. And is there anywhere that people can access local support, whether they're farmers or wanting to help out or anything like that?
Yeah, there's various. The NFU is quite good if you're an NFU member, and obviously we'll help other people out in the industry as well, such as National Farmers Union. We've got a structure throughout the country, so we do a lot of work around that. There's other charities and organisations as well. There's various organisations within the county and elsewhere supporting, and there's some national charities which are offering sort of financial and mental health support, and as sort of FCN, RABI, amongst just a couple of examples, aren't there, of that? Yeah,
and RABI, who are the Royal Agricultural Benevolent Institution as well, are really, really good. I think it's sometimes people being able to call them for some sort of aid if needs be. And whether people are that forthcoming in accessing that, I don't know. But I do think as a community, people are quite keen to support RABI. And I think farmers do want to see the charity prosper. So it's sort of by farmers for farmers, really, I suppose. But
and I think the other side to it is just that the support network coming from organisations. And if you young farmers, Farmers is a fantastic organisation, particularly for the younger people in the industry and people coming into it. It's a networking opportunity, it's a social support organisation for people as well as everything else it does. So I think there's a lot of value in that, isn't there, for the community?
There is, yeah. And I think young farmers especially is something that, you know, as a tool to support people, is it does build so many networks for people who are living and working in rural areas, where they might not otherwise know Joe Bloggs who farms 20 miles down the road, but they will, because they've been to a young farmers event and they've been there, and it's friends for life. And it's really important because you can be a member of young farmers from age 10 to 28, so you do have that time to establish some really, really solid friendships. And I think that's one of the greatest tools we've got, actually, in terms of helping people network and meet new people and share ideas and share problems as well, actually. Make friends that they can rely on.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of goes for that mental health support as well.
Totally.
It's not necessarily having to go to a mental health charity or anything like that, but it's actually being able to lean on each other, people who are in the exact same boat as you, and kind of sharing that. It might just be, oh, this really bad thing's happened, and it might have happened to them too, or just having those people to talk to about it as well.
Because it can be quite lonely. You're on the farm, and you're working often in isolation. There's a lot of lone working on the farm. Nowadays, we're more mechanised, so you're working more on the farm, so on your own. So it's quite nice to have these groups and support networks around us.
And I think we're talking about that local level, but if we take that step up, is there any support systems available for, like, because we're going into the winter months now and obviously flooded is becoming more prominent, is there anywhere that people listening can go to look for advice on as we're looking at the winter months, or flood recovery and things like that? I know, obviously, Alex, with your position in the EA, you might be aware of some.
Yeah, so things that we've been kind of looking at in terms of Environment Agency agriculture team, we do have a winter ready campaign, which is just being rolled out at the moment, sort of on the back of having such a deluge last year, of really, really horrendous wet weather for an extended period of time. So when I'm going out and doing farm visits, and we're also trying to roll this out so it's slightly more in the public domain, but it's more to do with resilience. So it'd be checking your gutterings, checking your drainage systems, making sure that they're as best prepared as you can make them before we get to those months, so hopefully water can get away before it becomes an issue. Another really big one is infrastructure. So we see a lot of people who have slurry systems, and if they don't have a cover on them and rainwater's falling in them, it's a greater stress on that store to bear the burden of more contents than there would be otherwise. So it's kind of being aware that people can have a contingency plan if they think that they're going to be in a situation like that. So whether it's that they can export some of their slurry to somewhere alternative, or whether it can go to an AD plan, for example, or to, if they're really, really concerned, to give us a call to see what we can do for them, because we'd much rather work with someone than a store over top and then being a pollution incident there. Would much rather be able to help and support people to find a solution before we get to that point. So a lot of the campaign is just to do with resilience, and the same with sort of making sure that your clean water and your dirty water is separated, to try and make sure that that any contamination's contained if you can make it, but your clean water can go, and making sure that it can get away. But we're always there, we're always very welcome. People are always very, very welcome to give us a call.
Brilliant.
If needs be. And we'll always put our heads together as a team and try and work with you if there's something we can do to help.
Amazing.
So one point on that and storage, I think it's a really good point about storage and planning for that. We have to store our, whether it's your muck or if it's from your livestock, so your livestock muck and slurry, we have to store that, and we have long periods you have to store it for, and that can be challenging in a wet year. So people are looking to expand that storage, whether it's slurry or muck, and it's a frustration I often hear from a lot of members and fellow farmers is about planning around that. So they want to do it at big cost, and it's actually getting the planning, and it gets blocked by planners. So I think with some of this is maybe just needs to be a bit of joined up thinking as well sometimes in terms of big picture thinking about, this is really needed. It's really important that this storage is there, and it doesn't need boundaries, barriers put in the way where they don't need to be. I
agree. It has to work for all stakeholders for it to get through easily, because especially even when you're in the planning stages, there's such a big financial outlay often before a foundation gets laid, that you really do need to try and make sure that everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet, and that possibly is something we do need to work harder to ensure that we achieve, because I mean often as well people find barriers to it if they're in national parks or areas of outstanding natural beauty, and they'll not be able to access planning quite as easily as somebody elsewhere will. But there's often a lot of barriers to it, and I think it's a really worthwhile point, actually.
It is, because there's a lot of benefit. What's good for protecting nutrients, it's very, very valuable resource to farms, you know, going forward more so it's going to be. So in terms of how, you know, using them to grow crops. So, you know, anything we can do to do that, everyone's working in the same direction. It's about sort of working together to achieve some of that.
Yeah,
it's worth pointing out, I think, as well, that the cost of manufactured fertilizers is so high, and although it was higher a couple of years ago, it's still incredibly expensive. So people, if they do have manures or slurries, want to make the most of the nutrient that they've already got there, so they don't have to supplement it further down the line. So it's also ensuring that that's available for people.
Right.
There shouldn't be a barrier to that, because it's stuff they are producing on the farm.
Right.
Oh, interesting. I'm just going to take us back a little bit when you were talking about some of the measures that you can implement on farms to help with flooding. What are things that you might have done on your own farms to help with that? Just give people some kind of real life examples.
So a lot of it's planning, and a lot of it comes down to in the very early stages. And I say I'm not planning isn't permission. I'm just thinking about laying out your farm and when you do things. So any developments that we've done in the farm, it's about putting some thought process and getting some advice. You know, whether it's from someone such as Alex, or getting advice from a trusted contractor or whoever else to look at rain. You know, where's the water going to flow from this project? How are we going to manage it? How are we going to do it properly? So I think there's a lot to be done around that. Planning it, and it's channeling water, capturing water, and if it's running where it shouldn't be running, it's making sure you can sort of channel it off fields at times, excessive rainfall. So there's bits of measures we're doing in the fields now. If it can be as simple as channel across a gateway. If you know it in a flood situation, which might only be hopefully 1 year and 2 or 3, but to prevent it, you know, going somewhere it shouldn't, you can put some channeling in just to do things like that. So some simple. We have a very good drainage contractor, and we work with him and take a lot of advice off him, and he comes up with suggestions to try and deal with these freak flooding events.
Yeah. Almost number one question whenever you go on somewhere, for me anyway, is kind of what goes where.
Yeah.
So if you do have any liquid of any sort, be it rainwater or whatever else, where does that eventually end up?
Yeah.
And it's those sort of questions you need to ask yourself immediately in terms of resilience. But I think it's all well and good having contingency plans in the event of it, but it's often looking at things like potential embankments, or sort of having an emergency plan there for before you actually get to the event. If you can see that the forecast, or indeed if it starts raining you don't think it's going to stop, if you have a plan at that point of how can I make this as easy as possible, or mitigate some of the damage at the very least as possible, that's kind of the stage we're at. But ultimately I think everybody's so vulnerable to it, that I think, as Billy says, it's planning in terms of not permission, just planning
on farm, sensible, isn't it?
And I guess even just having thought it through, so if you have a farm that hasn't really experienced much flooding yet, but because of how things seem to be going at the moment, more rainfall, chances are you could. So trying to work that out and kind of think ahead, get ahead of it a little bit, so that if it does happen and you're worried about your stock or crops or whichever it is, you've already kind of had that thought process. You're not doing it during the panic phase is, I guess, going to be really beneficial for farmers, and I guess young farmers who are just kind of coming into it and starting to take over as well.
It's going to be so much of a bigger issue for the younger generation coming in as well, because we're seeing so much more of this with the impacts of climate change. So for a lot of younger farmers as well, there's obviously a lot of the sustainable farming incentive grants and things are for other things quite aside from producing food often, aren't they? And it's just, I think there's a lot of modernisation kind of being done with the new generation.
And on like the incentive grants and things like that, is there a place where these farmers can go and look at things like that and see what those options are, like online, or any resources or anything like that?
Yeah, they're all on the Rural Payments Agency site, if people wish to have a look. But if you've got trusted land agents or farm advisors as well, they're often really well placed, if they know your farm and know your land, to be able to point you in the right direction. But equally, if you're prepared to sit and do that work, it's they are quite accessible if you know the right places to look. But it's always worthwhile speaking to, whether it be the NFU or the Farm and Advice Service is another really, really positive service that people offer, they are quite helpful at giving people some advice about what the best things to touch on possibly would be. But there's quite often meetings in the area as well. I think they're quite
there
good
has,
for
and
that.
it's been since it's rolled out. There's been all sorts of meetings around. There's a lot of information online. There's a lot of information about best practice and what works where, and sharing. It's peer to peer.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. We're getting better at doing that as an industry as
We
well.
are, definitely.
So talking to each other and learning off each other, because often someone has a hat on when they're coming on farm. They're either trying to sell something or sell an idea, whereas peer to peer you can be much more honest with each other about what's worked. With a lot of these things we're talking about as well, it's very important.
You often see things like grazing groups or cluster groups where farms that are farming in a certain area or have a certain interest will sort of talk to each other that way, and farmers love to talk about farming, I think, don't they? So it's
a bit tedious, but we do tend to.
But it's usually, but that's so powerful, I think, in terms of actually information sharing. And it's something we need to be quite proud of as an industry, because for everybody it is like a busman's holiday, really. And I find it, for me at work, as it's fascinating for me to see how other people's farming systems work. Because you can kind of go back and go, oh, that was a good idea, or and you see that in real time.
And we have a benchmarking group. There's various people run benchmarking groups. So for our crops, so we share all our financial information. Right. First time you do it, it's quite a daunting thing.
I can imagine.
You build trust amongst a group, and we've about 10 years ours now, and you share all your financial information on that enterprise, on the growing your crops, and you critique each other, and you'll why have you done that? Why have you not done that? And that's a really good way of screwing into the detail on it financially, but also some really physical good, advice and sort of techniques you pick up, just some really practical stuff as well. And of course, everyone's got a WhatsApp group. There's a WhatsApp group with just giving ideas across all the time to try and learn a bit more.
Fantastic. So I know you both said, obviously, you come from massive generational farming backgrounds. So I'm just wondering, over the years, how has technology basically helped improve becoming more resilient towards flooding on your farm? So say mums, dads, grandmas, granddads, whoever, to compare to what you're working with now, what improvements has there been and things like that help you become more resilient towards it?
I think people, even just having a little bit more information about what is in their soil and their soil health is so beneficial, and we see it so much more regularly now. And it is now a legal requirement, but people do test the soil, but it's adequately kind of interpreting what that analysis says to you and what that says about what you've got in your business. And I think sometimes if you can if you look after your soil will look after you.
Right. Okay.
A lot of the time it's the biggest resource that you really have on your farm. And it's the thing that drives your land value and the land price. It's about what's gonna grow and how productive it is, and everything else involved in that. So I do think that sort of agronomy and some of the information that's come to light with that, and people being really aware of it, is incredibly positive. I don't know whether you'd agree.
Big data, isn't it? The science has always been there.
Yeah.
Father, grandfather will be using similar science. We're probably more aware of it now. But we can do it now with technology now, so you can be using variable rate application of products. So we test in our soils and different patches of a field, and we're using satellite imagery as well for nitrogen, so you can tell where the crop needs it. So you're really tailoring your inputs to where it's needed, and that's improving soil health, which helps with water retention and nutrient retention, all the rest of it. So it's as big as you can think now. Some of the stuff you can do with big data and sensing, just through some cameras. And what can be got out of that data is...
I think as well, we've got things that are like really simple, like we've got flood forecasting tools, and you can sign up to receive alerts online to kind of prepare for flooding and things like that. So obviously there's the extremes that you've just spoke about there with the soils, but there is, I guess, maybe cheaper alternatives that people can look at as well.
It's all getting cheaper. It's all just through mobile phone. It's all mobile phone technology now.
Brilliant.
It's going that way. And absolutely, the forecasting. For a previous generation, my father's still forecasting. It's going to rain this afternoon. It's not going to, and he can't handle the percentages and the risks and the.
As I laid down, it's going to rain.
Whereas now it's so.
I still look at that. Whenever I see it, if they're next to a fence and lying down, I'm like, a storm's coming.
Definitely.
But I think stuff like, we do sometimes encourage, if people are in somewhere that's quite vulnerable, that you can get sort of weather monitoring systems installed, and there is an investment element involved with that.
Of course.
But if it's somewhere that's quite vulnerable, that can often be quite worth your while in terms of helping you prepare. But even apps like, flood alert apps and things are just so beneficial for people in terms of further planning.
It's just that extra warning.
Gives you heads up, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that's some of the benefits. What kind of barriers have you seen for farmers trying to access kind of any flood resilience measures or recovery in that aspect as well?
So yeah, there's been barriers. I think some of them are possibly political. Sometimes political will and gets in the way, and supporting that. How, if there's any help and support to let people overcome it, how that can be distributed and how that'll be done fairly, so that the right people are getting access and support in the right way. So it's trying to find ways of recognising who needs the support in the first place and the help with it. And obviously who needs the extra help as well to get rid of the water as well. And who's what what are the issues, what is a restricting factor in terms of water flow, elsewhere as well.
And compensation payments aren't possibly what there would be either as well in terms of for land loss.
No, it's the cost of losing the crop. It's significant, and the cost and loss potential as well from that as well. So is significant. And I mean, it's often the case where the land is flooded and it's doing a good. It's preventing flooding downstream. It's frustrating that sometimes the loss happens and the farmer has to sort of swallow it. So I don't know what more could be done, maybe to be a bit more. Again, it's working together.
It is.
It's working together to maybe identify a payment could be made, a mechanism put in place to allow a farmer and jointly to let land be flooded to protect land elsewhere downstream. But it's working together, so it's a more of a managed system. Someone isn't just losing the crop.
It's quite a big thing where we, have these patches of like what we call sacrificial land that we're just allowed to flood so that it can help save people's homes or crops or whatever it is.
But I think that just needs managing, doesn't it? It needs to be in the right place, and it needs to be right recompense for that, because it's a service, isn't it?
That's the But it drives land prices so much as well that people's land value will decrease if it's somewhere that's going to be particularly vulnerable to a flood risk all the time.
And I guess that's something you see with just house prices as well, don't you? As soon as the flood, it's like, oh right, well that's going to make it more difficult. So makes sense that it's the same across farming as well.
And land's such a commodity as well that it is really challenging to kind of work with an area that continues to happen with.
But there is a big value. There's potential, isn't there? If the land, the right place can hold that water back in the right place, and it's sort of recognising that. And it is about having a joined up approach to it.
I agree. And I think our local Rivers Trust as well actually are really, really positive, and there's some really good contacts there. If people want to engage with them. And I think they're getting better actually at going out to either auction marts or other events where they'll meet farmers, so that there's a point of contact there, because often the local Rivers Trust are quite keen to work with farmers sometimes on some of this. So that's also a positive. If there's work or collaborative stuff that they can do together, that's something that hopefully will start to move.
It's looking at those multi-benefits again, isn't it?
I think it's already happening, but it'd be really good if that's more in the consciousness of people that are sort of living and working with land, that they can access some of that, or there's points of contact if they're not sure.
Brilliant. So I guess my next question is, how can farmers in rural communities become more actively involved in shaping how we go about flood management and flood recovery? So now obviously yourself, Billy, you're heavily involved, and Alex, through the work you do, it's amazing, but how can we get more people involved?
So I think through organisations, I think it is about joint working and using the organisations that are there. It maybe needs to happen a bit more locally at times if there's an issue, which might be a case of groups of farmers coming together, groups of interested parties coming together to try and work on that as well. I mean, elsewhere in the country there's drainage boards. We haven't got them just near us, and I don't think you'll have many in your patch, but a bit elsewhere, a bit further south, is sort of drainage boards, and they'll be looking at this because of where they are in low-lying areas. They're managing the water courses around them, and that can help. That can help, and that can work quite well. But I think it's using the organisations that are there, using contacts, with the EA or whichever body it is as well, to try and to work on it.
We will always feed it back. So say if we go and set up shop at an auction mart for a morning to see if we can get, and we are there as a point of contact if people want to come and talk to us, and always lend an ear. But, you know, if people do want to raise with us a particular issue in a particular area that think we need to be aware of, we can always try and follow that up with the relevant team and make sure that they're aware of what's happening, or try and get them to support some other way. But I think even the likes of Billy and the rest of the NFU as well, if you've got things that you are concerned about, they are really worth bringing to your attention.
Can facilitate a lot as well. We can draw people together through, we've got a structure that goes, you know, from the branches, some really quite localised up to national. And we're very good, you know, the team is fantastic. We've got a fantastic staff team, you know, I'm just a farmer, you know, just elected to do a bit for them. But the staff team is fantastic, and they can pull things together, working with all the partners.
Fantastic.
An incredible influence as well, actually, as far as people that can lobby. I think the NFU do a completely sterling job.
So there's one for the NFU too.
Well,
Give me some work, Billy.
We've mentioned the NFU quite a lot, obviously. So is there a way that people can get involved, contact yourselves, if they'd like to make connections, or if they've got any issues they'd like to raise and things like that?
So again, there's all online. A lot of it's online.
Yeah.
So it's a membership organisation. You are a member of it. So
right,
not everyone is a member.
Yeah.
It'd be great if more people were, but it's an organisation. It's there to represent and help its members, family members.
Yeah, brilliant.
But it's all online. The contacts are there. You know, just look for your local. It'll point you in the right direction.
Brilliant.
I think it's fair to say as well, probably, that they are quite keen to get a lot of the younger generation involved as
well.
well.
Definitely.
Because when I've sometimes gone, because I'm an NFU member despite being also EA, working for the EA, but I've gone and sat in meetings with the NFU before and said, oh great, it would be really good if we've got some of the new generation, the next generation, coming to some of these meetings, because we want to hear from you. So if there's a takeaway from that, I think that would be really, really nice as well to get.
They've got different perspectives on things, don't they? And obviously new takes and things
absolutely,
like that. So
that's what it's about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why do you think it is that the younger generation aren't quite as involved at the moment?
I think there is a lot of interest, actually.
Right.
I think there's a lot of interest there's a generation coming through now who are well informed through social media, through online presence. You know, there's quite a few people out there, influencers out there, who they sort of follow, and they get a very honest and insightful look at the working life on a farm. Mm-hmm. It's encouraging. It's quite good to see. There's a generation coming through, I think, who are seeing agriculture as a positive and a good industry to be involved with.
Definitely.
So I think there is a generation coming through. It tends to be the average age of a farmer is quoted as being something really high, but I think the key point with that is that's the owner of a business.
Yeah.
Right.
Where you've got a long succession, there's a long lead in before you're allowed to given the reins to run the business.
Yeah.
So there's a whole I think that's sort of
got to start the training young.
That's it,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think there's people with excellent ideas. It's making sure that they back themselves enough to do it justice sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess that's just a bit of a general thing with younger generations. Whenever you're coming into whatever career, you're always a bit more nervous and not quite as confident, are you? So I guess it's trying to instill that confidence in them.
Yeah. I say this quite regularly with people and young farmers, actually, that you've just got to back yourself a little bit.
Definitely.
And it's easier said than done sometimes, and we all fall foul of it. But,
we've all been there.
But everybody does have something of value to add to the conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
No right or wrong, is there? I think the other thing is there's so many jobs around on farm farming.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got people supplying you, whether that's goods or services.
Right.
People, you know, upstream and downstream, the people we sell our products to as well. There's agencies, there's other people. There's so many opportunities, I think, for around agriculture. You know,
it's a massive industry now, isn't it?
And food, you know, it's a staple, isn't it?
Yeah,
Economy
absolutely.
Great. Well, I think we will wrap that up there. Thank you very much to our guests. It's been really interesting talking to you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you for watching this episode of Rising Waters. Next, we're sharing a quick tip on how to prepare an emergency kit for flooding. An emergency kit is an essential for evacuating your home in the event of flooding. Creating a checklist of items to include in your kit can help you quickly gather what you need when the time comes. Here are some important items to consider adding to your kit. Important documents and contact information, such as insurance papers. Warm and waterproof clothing, and also some footwear. Baby care items, if applicable. Essential or prescribed medications and medical devices. A mobile phone, and don't forget its charger. For more details on what to include in your emergency kit, visit the .gov website and search for Personal Flood Plan. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode of Rising Waters. Remember, stay dry, stay alert, and stay safe. This episode of Rising Waters was made possible by all of our partners and volunteers. Make sure to check out the show notes or description for this episode to learn more about what you heard today.